The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
What really worries me is we're talking about people's finance. And if they make the wrong investment decision based on a general piece of advice that's out there on TikTok or Facebook, it could be very devastating to them.
Then, later tonight.
Most endocrine disrupting chemicals, hormonally disrupting chemicals, most carcinogenic chemicals that people come in contact with every day come from the consumer products we use every day.
If you know what an influencer is, you can likely guess what a Finfluencer is, such as the lingo for self-made social media personalities who, in the latter case, dispense all kinds of financial wisdom on platforms such as YouTube, TikTok, or even the old-fashioned ones such as Facebook. But not all advice is equal. So while it might be free advice, is it good advice? Joining us now on how to navigate these uncharted waters, we're joined in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan by Kaval Olsen-LePage, certified financial planner and advisory team leader with Affinity Wealth Management. And here in our studio, Siobhan Llewellyn, financial content creator and co-founder of Hiver Academy, which provides free online classes on personal finance catered towards women. Kurt Rosentreter, portfolio manager with Manulife Securities and a certified independent financial advisor. And Jim Chong, financial content creator, coach, and co-founder of the Fact Fire Club, which offers online classes on gaining financial independence. And we're delighted to welcome all of you, both here to our studio in Midtown Toronto. And Kaval, nice to have you on the line from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. And why don't we start with you right away? What do you see, Kaval, as the benefits of financial content creators on social media?
I think one of the benefits that we're seeing is the increased engagement that we're seeing from our younger Canadians into having more of an interest into their own financial future. We know that it's not something that's taught readily in schools. So the fact that they're able to access this content to maybe encourage them to do the research on their own or seek professional advice has definitely been beneficial.
So is the idea you sort of got to go where they want you to be and they want you to be on social media these days? Something as simple as that?
Yeah, we do know that, our millennial and Gen Z audiences are definitely more drawn to the ease of information that's coming from TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. We like the videos. I'm an elder millennial myself. I would much prefer to watch a quick 5-minute video than stream through maybe a 5-page news article. So I think it's definitely something that leans towards their tendencies.
Kurt, we hear all sorts of stories about how financially illiterate so many people are in this province these days. Do you think this fills some of that gap?
Absolutely it does. I would say financial literacy is still at an all-time low in every age bracket. I teach courses across Canada. I see it all the time. So anything you can do to, I think, initiate some interest by the public to learn a bit about finance to make them more knowledgeable is healthy. It's just more about, is it the correct advice to be giving in the first place?
Well, we will get to that in a bit. Siobhan, I want you to tell us about the Hiver Academy, or as we say in Quebec, the Hiver Academy.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What are you doing there?
So at Hiver Academy, we developed this platform as a way to help empower women to feel like they're in the driver's seat of their own personal finance journey and to take control of their own finances, and most importantly, to feel confident doing it.
And what prompted you to do this?
I think based on our own experience of 2 women trying to navigate the world of money and being in a situation where we felt the guilt, the shame, the judgment around trying to take control of your own finances and having that be such a barrier to taking that next step and to actually taking action or asking questions or being curious about it. And so that was the main inspiration. It started with ourselves, and quickly we realized that we are definitely not the only ones that feel this way.
Maybe I'm missing something here, but what's the guilt and shame of your personal financial situation?
I think in terms of, especially as a student, I carried a lot of student debt. I wasn't able to pay that off in a short amount of time. And I think with parents that are more risk averse or friends that didn't have the same situations as myself, I felt like I was digging myself into a deeper hole than I had to, and I didn't quite understand why. And it was really because I didn't have the tools, the resources, or the support network to be able to do that. And in joining forces with my friends and making sort of a pact to help us learn and be curious about that, it really started to snowball into this business that we have today.
Gotcha. Jim, the Fat Fire Club. That does not sound like a financial literacy or a financial advisory group, but I guess, well, I guess it is. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Well, the FIRE group is called Financial Independence Retire Early. And I was sort of put in that bucket, even though that was not my intent. My intent was to relay my experiences investing over 30 years. I'm a Canadian that invests only in U.S. assets, U.S. real estate. And I started putting my information out there, and people said, oh, this is like FIRE. This is very similar. He's not working anymore because he was able to generate investment returns and cash flow. So they sort of put me in that bucket, and I ran with it.
What sort of gap in financial literacy or in financial services do you think you're filling?
So my intent wasn't to fill that need. I was just trying to talk to how I was when I was 14 years old, and I knew nothing. And everyone was lying to me about what could be done or what could not be done about money. I got so frustrated, I just went off on my own and started reading dozens and dozens of books, and I did it myself, and I figured out what worked, what didn't work, what are the caveats, what are the risks. Then I got onto social media, and then it just took off. I did not expect it. I got onto social media 2 years ago, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting 5 million views a month.
Say that again.
I'm getting 5 million views a month.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Okay, good for you. All right, now Siobhan, back to you for a second here. I get that a guy who works for a company that's called Manulife is allowed to give financial advice.
Yes.
Okay, we've all heard of Manulife. Are you legally allowed to provide financial advice?
Great question. We do not provide financial advice. I think we provide financial inspiration. And
What's the difference?
I think the difference is that when it comes to professionals, they are the experts, they have the education, and they have the knowledge to be able to direct the decisions that you make. Where we are trying to fill a gap is to help you feel like you have the foundational concepts to even take that next step to go to a professional advisor. And I think there is quite a large gap in terms of people not feeling or not believing that they are worth having an advisor for or having a financial planner because they're so overwhelmed with their own situation. And so we're trying to inspire people to get that confidence back and make them feel like they have a seat at the table and understand the opportunities available to them so that they can dictate their own financial journeys.
Okay, this is another one of these older people questions. How do you make money at what you do?
Another great question. So we are really fortunate to be able to partner with different organizations or financial institutions to be able to help them develop content around the products or services that they have and create our own review and experience of the product, and to be able to relay that in a way that is accessible, approachable, and understandable to our audience so that they can not only understand what these services and products are, but understand how they can benefit from them and apply it to their own life as well.
Okay, Jim, I'm going to follow up with you on that because this is another thing I need to understand here. Again, I get how a guy from Manulife makes money. How do people who put financial, if you don't want to call it advice, let's call it inspiration, whatever, how do you, okay, you get 5 million views a month? How do you make money from that?
So the intent at the beginning was not to make money, but I knew that with 5 million views a month, you could monetize it. And this is a totally different topic from financial literacy. Right? When you have attention, this is how you generally monetize it. It goes into a landing page where you offer something of value. So maybe 10 steps to sort of reduce your expenses, something like that. People want that download. You get that download, you have their contact information, and then you start asking them, what do you want to learn about? You basically sell them what they want to know. I want to learn how to invest in U.S. real estate. What did you do? What bank did you use? What mortgage did you get? What states did you look at? Why did you look there? How did you find the crime statistics? And then we build what they want, and then they purchase it.
All right, now we're going to get to the other side of this, which is, Jim, in your view, is there anything, nefarious is too strong a word, but anything concerning about the business model that they've just described here, given that there are, there are potentially built-in conflicts of interest here?
I think that, Steve, the difference between, influencers, pushing perfume or clothing, it's not quite the same as financial services where people can really get hurt. I think if I'm a Finfluencer, what I would be concerned about is credibility and liability. Credibility is things like, designations, experience. Do you have professional liability insurance if someone sues you? Who's supervising the advice you give? What's the fine print that needs to be on the website? That's all about being a better professional, and transparency of fees disclosed up front. October 3rd, Kim Kardashian just got fined $1.2 million for non-disclosing the fact she was paid by a crypto company to basically send out a message about them. That could have been taken, dealt with up front had she disclosed that. So I think the credibility side of it is if you want to be a professional in the eyes of how the government will view you and how they view the regulated channel, there's things that are pretty clearly you can do now. Go out and get your certified financial planner designation if you don't already have it, if you want to give any kind of financial advice. I think on the liability side, similarly, I would be so darn worried if I was doing this without the systems I have around me of supervision, of pre-approvals, of checkups and insurance, that if someone sued me because I told them to do the wrong thing on financial advice, they're going to take my house. And I think that's just good for the Finfluencers to protect themselves, but I think it'll also help the credibility of the whole industry. And it is playing a darn good role. Like my daughters who came through high school in the last 5 years got a few hours of financial education, that's it. They don't want to deal with dad. They want to be independent. They're also a little concerned and scared about it, right? Because it's intimidating stuff to sit with a guy in a suit who's old and talk personal finance. So it's absolutely serving a need to increase the education in the marketplace on basic personal financial topics. All ages should really adopt that, but let's be careful what we offer.
Okay, let's hear from Kaval on this. What do you say?
I would definitely have to agree with Kurt, where the concern lies on is how specific is that financial advice going to be, and are our Finfluencers adequately, discussing the risks that are associated, especially if you're looking at specific investment advice. I've researched some of these Finfluencers, and you can see anything from a general range of, advice giving. What is a registered retirement savings plan? What is a tax-free savings plan? How do you find your contribution limits? That's fantastic advice. That's stuff that people may not be aware of, and directing them to the appropriate websites to find that is fantastic. Where the concern is, and I'm sure Kurt can echo this, is when you start seeing very specific discussions around certain investments, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's specific stocks, ETFs, that side of things. And there's no discussion on the risk of investing in those. And there's no direction to go seek professional advice, because just because it's working for that Finfluencer doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for, that Canadian who's watching that video at that time. And so that's, what really worries me is we're talking about people's finance. And if they make the wrong investment decision based on a general piece of advice that's out there on TikTok or Facebook, it could be very devastating to them.
Okay, you just mentioned an acronym, and this is an acronym-free zone, so we're going to say ETFs, exchange-traded funds, just so everybody knows what that is. Okay, Siobhan, let me get you back in here. You've heard some of the concerns. What do you have to say?
I think everything that they've said is completely fair, and I think it's something that both my co-founder and I take very seriously. And I think when you decide to have a business online, you take a sense of responsibility for what content you are putting out, and I expect to also be given that same responsibility from other types of legislation or institutions. So, for example, if I'm putting out content that goes just over the line of that financial advice, I expect that to be taken down, or at least, being flagged. And what Kaval was saying in terms of that foundational level up until they start to have that advice conversation is really where Hyber Academy fits in perfectly. So we are getting people that foundational financial literacy, that inspiration, that information. And then when they're ready to take that next step, when they, graduated from that foundational basis, then they move on to the discussions with financial planners and financial advisors and people that have that expertise, that credibility, to be able to direct their futures, because we're just trying to have people get that confidence first.
Jim, what do you say to these concerns?
100% agree. So all my social media platforms say it's education, not advice. You need to consult a financial advisor. No matter what idea you get from social media, I don't care what it is, stocks, bonds, crypto, real estate, you need to consult with your financial advisor and not take action on advice that you're hearing from social media. So 100%, you should treat it as education, not advice.
we have some info as it regards to that. And to that end, Sheldon, I'm going to ask you if you would to bring this up. This is the bottom of page 3. Australia penalizes unlicensed financial services. Earlier this year, the Australian government introduced new laws cracking down on creators offering financial advice without a federally issued license. Influencers can now be imprisoned for committing offenses such as profiting from affiliate links that direct followers to online brokers, providing opinions that a positive return is a guaranteed on a class of products, for example, those ETFs we talked about, exchange-traded funds, sharing with their followers long-term stocks and suggesting they buy and hold them, etc. Okay, this, I guess, raises a question. Why don't we hear, Kurt, from you first on this? Should we do this here?
So the regulation is coming on the whole online education, Finfluencer marketplace. Australia's led the way for a couple of years now, included in the regulation of their licensed financial advisor marketplace. UK, USA, Canada is a bit slower on this. And I think part of what's also good to appreciate is even in the regulated licensed world I'm operating in, mortgages are licensed and regulated different than insurance, which is licensed and regulated different than investment products. Within investment products, there's different licenses, different regulations, different requirements. And in the middle is general financial advice that's largely unregulated. So if you want to talk about goals and cash flow and saving for retirement, really, even in the regulated world, not a lot of people supervising or watching over that. So it's even more complicated because it depends on, in Canada, what type of advice you're giving. They're all in different pages. The provinces are even different to some degree. But regulation's coming because even in the license channel, something just came out a few months ago where they're now looking at titles of financial advisors in Ontario. So what I put on my business card, next up's going to be credentials. What do all those credentials mean? I've got 8 credentials. And if one of them was fake on my business card, you'd never know. They're not, but I'm just saying, you'd never know. So there's a lot of work to do, both in the regulated channel, and this is just added in, it's coming too. So if you want to get ahead of it, because they can literally shut you down if you don't kind of follow these rules over time.
Cavell, let's hear from you on this. Is this coming to Canada, and should it?
I think it's definitely on its way. Like Kurt mentioned, Australia is a leader in that they've regulated titles for who can call themselves a financial planner or financial advisor for a few years now, and Canada's in the process of doing that, which is fantastic. Definitely agree. And I do believe that there needs to be some regulation, at least in terms of, like we said, what kind of disclaimers are you putting on your online video to indicate, I'm being paid by such and such company to recommend this product to you, or again, making this investment recommendation because it worked for me, but it's not actually advice. Please go do your own research and talk to your financial advisor. So I definitely think it's on its way, and I think it's a good thing.
Jim, what say you?
I totally agree. So I think if you're giving advice on social media that seems questionable, like it's not education, it's not inspiration, it kind of borders, like you're talking about a stock, you're talking about a ETF, you should make a disclaimer very clear to say that this is not advice. You should consult your financial advisor, or some kind of disclaimer like that for sure. I put that everywhere on my social media channels, and it's important. But the fact is, 99% of people on TikTok, on the new platforms, they don't worry about that stuff, and that's a big problem. So one of the benefits of social media is that you get a lot of access to information, but 99% of that information, I would say, is harmful.
Do you, Siobhan, you want the government regulating what you put up on your website?
I think it should be regulated if it's in the best interest of the people, because I think within each of our different businesses, people are at the heart of it, and we're trying to help them. And so if institutions and companies like TikTok and Instagram can also take responsibility for ensuring that we are doing the best we can and legally, then I think that's a great step to helping us all make sure that we have a level of discernment when it comes to consuming social media.
Okay, let's do, Jim, I want to talk to you about Logan Paul. I got to confess, I didn't know who Logan Paul was before doing this. The so-called mega influencer, Logan Paul. You guys all know who he is?
Yes.
Sort of.
You all know who he is. Okay. All right. Anyway, he promoted some obscure cryptocurrency called Dink Doink. You ever heard of this?
Yeah.
Yeah? Am I like totally out of it here? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, Dink Doink, I hadn't heard of before doing the research for this. He's got 6 million followers and he's promoting it to them, but he didn't disclose, apropos of what you said about Kardashian, didn't disclose an important conflict of interest. He was friends with the creator of the crypto coin, and they'd come up with this idea together, and then the price of Dink Doink plummets, and he finds himself in hot water. So the question, okay, Jim, come on in this. How common is bad cryptocurrency advice in the Finfluencer world?
I think it's rampant. Like last year when I was on TikTok, almost everything in my feed was on promoting a coin or promoting an NFT or promoting something related to
NFT,
cryptocurrency.
that's another one. Hang on, I think I might know this one. Non-fungible token? Okay.
Correct. So that was everywhere. And it was really bad advice. It was very damaging. But the voice and the interest and the hype around it was so big, it was almost inevitable that no one, including regulators, could keep up with it, and a lot of people got hurt. And it's a danger. That's exactly why it's dangerous to listen to social media when it comes to different asset classes and treating it like advice.
Having said that, Kurt, would you acknowledge there is some subjectivity to advice given, even by more established players like you at Manulife, for example? You do have to be aware of the fact that the advice you're giving is your opinion.
Absolutely. There's a framework of questioning and profile building. There's a range of securities you can offer that aren't suitable for everybody. You got to factor in fees and fee transparencies, fee levels, tax sensitivity, risk tolerance, the purpose of the account, goals, and all that. So for sure, this is not a science. It's an art to some degree within a framework that regulators have defined to make sure we keep people out of the ditch and manage the liability and make sure they reach their goals.
Cavell, how about you on that? Any concerns about this? I mean, this is a subjective business based on facts, but it's a subjective business at the end of the day, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just like Kurt said, our regulators have, very specific risk questionnaires that we have to ask our investors to determine suitability. And it's not just how much risk are they willing to take. It has to do with taking a look at their net worth. How much cash flow do they have? How much liquidity? If they were in an emergency situation, is this the only investment that they have, and would they need to draw on it? And, being very clear with our investors on the true volatility and nature of that investment is key. And sometimes we will tell them that we're not comfortable selling that investment to them. And I have actually refused, because it is also my business on the line, and I don't want to make a recommendation that I believe is unsuitable based on their circumstances, and that would lead them then to possibly go to a discount online brokerage and purchase it themselves. Okay. But ultimately, we do a very in-depth look into our clients and what's suitable for them before we make that recommendation.
Now, Siobhan, I'm told that some platforms are trying to be more aware when there is either malicious or quite obviously unhelpful content on their financial advice sites, and they're trying to take it down. Mm-hmm. And I gather TikTok, they're actually using artificial intelligence to help them discern what's appropriate and what's not, what's unsafe, etc. Any of your videos, have you had any of them pulled down by any platforms?
Luckily, we have a 100% live rate. We haven't had any videos taken down. We have other people in our network that have gone through that. And I think because of the nature of what we do and focusing on the foundational basic principles of financial literacy, we have a safer space that we can create content in. But I definitely recognize the risks, like both Kurt and Cavell are talking about, in terms of that discussion and those blurred lines, and that content should be flagged. And if you feel as an influencer that it still deserves to be public, then we can dispute that and recommend that they review it. So it gives us an opportunity to go back, but I think it saves the people first. So.
Can you give us some hints on what to look for on the difference between what would be sort of reputable, trustworthy information on your site versus, not on yours, but on, say, other sites that are, clearly over the line?
Yeah, I like to think of it as aspirational versus inspirational influencers. If you're following people that you feel that pressure and that urge to be like them or to have what they have, then I encourage you to take a step back and sort of filter through your social media and make sure that you're following people that inspire to be the best version of yourself and make you feel like there is no pressure, there is no urgency, because there's nothing quick about building wealth, as perhaps everyone can agree to. And so I think if there is that pressure, that urgency, take a step back and find someone that makes you feel like you have the time, the energy, and the confidence to look into it at your own pace.
So, Kaval, if I'm on a website and I see somebody dripping in jewelry with fancy cars and so on, maybe I should just maybe take a pause on listening carefully to that stuff?
I mean, with any online advice, right? I think Jim, Siobhan, Kurt, we've all said the same thing. It's about doing your own due diligence and research after. Red flags to look out for: are they recommending specific products? Have they disclosed whether or not they're receiving financial gain from that? I mean, the Kim Kardashian, Paul Logan examples are prime examples of that. And so it's not necessarily, because they've got a diamond ring, you don't want to listen to them, but using that as your first stepping stone to then look at some additional advice, and take that information that you receive, take it to your planner or your advisor, discuss what you've seen, and talk about extending that education. See what they can teach you about giving whether or not that's a suitable product for you or a suitable even investment recommendation or savings plan.
We've got just a few minutes left here, and let's do, Sheldon, how about top of page 2 here? Let's do one more graphic. Who's watching this stuff? Who consumes financial content online? You will not be surprised to hear 33% of Canadian Gen, either Zers or Zers, depending on how you want to pronounce it, and 22% of millennials refer to financial influencers and social media for their investment decisions. In comparison, just 7% of Canadians over the age of 55 rely on these sources. That, according to a survey by Polera Strategic Insights. It was done for the Bank of Montreal, results released in April of this year. Okay, Kurt, there's no surprise in those numbers, is there?
No, because you're coming out of high school with no financial education. You're intimidated, you're concerned, you're stepping into jobs, you've got no idea what to do. And between about 25 and 35 years old, some of your life's biggest events happen. You're going to get a job you hope you have 40 years. You're going to sign up for a mortgage, the biggest debt of your life. You may get married, have children, and there's no one to turn to for financial advice. You want to start to push away from your parents. Maybe they're not the most financially literate either. And so, general education, the comfort and convenience of social media is there to kind of fill the void. The challenge, though, and the difference, I think, between a 30-year-old and a 55-year-old is experience, is that they've now, learned, they've been burnt a few times over 25 years. They do look for the fine print, they look for the credibilities, the designation, they know when to turn to experts when they need it. So I think that it's just a learning experience, and as long as we can guide the young folks to make sure they know the difference between real and fake, they'll be fine too.
Jim, do you know the demographics of the people who are on your site?
Yeah, it's very interesting. TikTok actually does give analytics, and it seems like even though TikTok itself skews younger to 10, 12-year-old, the people that are following me seem to be 25 to 55. It's a big range. A large part of them come from America, and with the 5 million views, they skew about 45% women, 55% men. So it's a very interesting demographic. It's not as young as you would think from the platform.
Siobhan, how about you? Do you know?
Yeah, we started at about 100% female rate, and we netted out.
Which makes sense, because that's who you were aiming at.
Yeah,
anyway.
that's where we aimed at. And then we realized a few months in that we ended up at a 70-30. So 70% female, 30% male.
Kaval, in your experience, do you think the Gen Zs, Gen Zs, the millennials, I think you mentioned earlier that you thought you were an elder millennial. I'm not sure there's anything elder about you, but anyway. Do you think they are more money anxious or financial services anxious than previous generations?
We've definitely seen that, yes. About 45% of millennials and Gen Z, according to the FP Canada, Financial Planners Canada's Financial Stress Index, indicate that money is a stressor that is leading to negative mental health. What we are finding is, in that data where you indicated, about 33% of Gen Zs getting it from TikTok, Facebook, we are also seeing that about 47% 7% are still going to a trusted advisor. So I think which is more significant than some of our older generations. So I think that the Finfluencers are doing a good job of filling that void to get them to that next step to talk to a financial advisor. And what we've seen from the Financial Stress Index is that more than half of people who use a financial advisor or have a financial plan feel less financial stress. So it's relieving that anxiety because they have a plan, they can see their progress. In times like right now where we're experiencing high inflation and, significant market volatility, being able to look at your plan and seeing that you're still making progress helps lift that weight off of your shoulder. And I think that's a definite benefit to working with a planner.
Last word goes to Saskatoon, Saskatchewan today. Kaval Olson-LePage, we thank you for joining us on the line from out west. Kurt Rosentreter is here from Manulife Securities, and our friends on the other side of the table, Siobhan Llewellyn and Jim Chong from Hiver Academy and Fat Fire Club, respectively. It's great to have all of you on TVO tonight. Many thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
If you are what you eat, and our food chain increasingly includes plastics, what does that make us? With us now on why that's a real and growing issue for our health, we welcome, in Utrecht, Netherlands, Juliette Legler. She's a professor of toxicology at Utrecht University. In Piscataway, New Jersey, Phoebe Stapleton, assistant professor of pharmacology and toxicology at Rutgers University. And here in our studio, Rick Smith, president of the Canadian Climate Institute and co-author of Slow Death by Rubber Duck, The Secret Danger of Everyday Things, which is a great title for a book. And Rick, it's great to have you back here in our studio, and to our guests in Points Beyond, thank you for joining us as well. I want to read this quote here from Nautilus magazine from last May to get us started here and set up the discussion to come. Sheldon, the graphic, if you would. Microplastics have been found in places as remote as Antarctica and the summit of Mount Everest, in fish guts and in honeybees. Researchers recently found tiny plastic particles in the lungs of surgical patients, the blood of donors, and the placentas of unborn babies. According to one study, people may be eating as much as a credit card's worth of plastic each week. Okay, Rick, get us started here. I'm sure people have seen the pictures on the news, for example, of these huge scows of plastics in the oceans and that kind of thing, a garbage island in the Pacific. But how big is the problem of plastic that's actually too tiny for us even to see?
Well, I mean, it's a huge problem, and it's getting worse. And as you point out, I think people have seen news coverage of sea turtles being threatened by the plastic in the oceans, very visible problems. But it turns out when it comes to human health, when it comes to the toxicology of plastics, it's what we can't see that's turning out to be the real problem. So in the last few years, scientists have found that when plastic gets into the environment, it never really breaks down. It just, sunlight will break it into smaller pieces. The action of waves will break it into smaller pieces. It gets down to a microscopic size, and then it starts to circulate in the ecosystem. And guess what? It turns out that it accumulates in us, in our bodies.
Phoebe, follow up on that if you would. And if you can, just sort of take us through a typical day. How do these microplastics actually make their way into our bodies?
Yes, Rick is absolutely right. They get broken down into these smaller and smaller pieces. Those pieces are of the size that can be ingested, whether that's through food products, either things that the animal has eaten prior, or the packaging and the processing of the food, of the water that we drink, both tapped and bottled. It's been found there. And then also in the air. So we can be breathing these particles into our lungs. And the size of those particles really makes an impact on where they go in the lungs and also where they go in our GI system after we ingest them.
Juliette, can I just understand that a little better? Are you saying every time we take a swig of water, for example, out of a plastic bottle, we are ingesting not just the water, but some very, very tiny bits of plastic as well?
Well, there is certainly a very good chance of that. Yes, there have been microplastics found in water and in food. The question is, of course, there's also, could be other things in our water as well, including chemicals or other contaminants. But the question is that harmful to our body? And that's, of course, where our research comes in. once we ingest these plastic particles, where do they go in our body, or are they excreted? And will they cause harm there? And that's something we really don't know very well yet, and something that a lot of research is being undertaken at the moment to figure out.
Those are key questions, but I'm not going to get to those just yet. I want to develop the tension of the narrative a little more, because Rick did an experiment on himself.
Yep.
And I'd like you to give us some of the details around that. Why did you do this, and what did you do?
Well, about 13 years ago, Bruce Laurie and I wrote a book called Slow Death by Rubber Duck, where we tried to get at this notion of chemicals in consumer products. So quite often when people think about pollution, they think about big belching smokestacks, they think about water pollution. It turns out these days that most endocrine disrupting chemicals, hormonally disrupting chemicals, most carcinogenic chemicals that people come in contact with every day come from the consumer products we use every day. So Bruce and I, over the years, have tested ourselves to see to what extent these chemicals will accumulate in our bodies. And a couple of years ago in the Globe and Mail, I did this with microplastics. So I wanted to see, how easy is it just living your daily life?
So you didn't do anything different or special?
A 6-day experiment. First 2 days, I just lived my life normally. I took a stool sample every day. My wife found this all kind of
charming,
extremely off-putting. But in the last 4 days of the experiment, I actually tried to crank up my level. Anything I ate, I made sure came wrapped in plastic. I only drank bottled water for the last 4 days. I left my food out on the table so that household dust, which is mostly microplastics these days, could accumulate on the food. And what we found is that in the last few days of the experiment, my microplastics levels did increase.
Is that to suggest that if you went in the opposite direction, avoided plastic to the best of your knowledge altogether, you could get the amount of plastics in your system to zero?
Almost certainly you couldn't get it to zero, because I'm just looking around the studio here or any building, most household dust in the corner of a room would be microplastics these days. It's in the air that we breathe. Couldn't get it to zero, but almost certainly you could reduce it if you tried to eliminate as much plastic as possible from your life.
Phoebe, apparently last spring there were 2 studies that came out in the UK and in Netherlands showing microplastics deep inside the lungs of surgical patients, of all things, and in the blood of anonymous donors. Now, how important would you say those studies are for our understanding of microplastics and how they move around?
I think those studies are vitally important. They are the first studies to really identify that they are indeed in human tissues. So scientists have been saying that it's likely for a long time, but these were the studies to really identify that they're there. The one in the human lung patients, especially because it used a special type of microscopy to be able to really visualize these particles and identify what they were. The one in the bloodstream was a little bit different. It used a chemical analysis to be able to identify them, but it was really some of the first early proof, along with the other study that you referenced, looking at human placenta, that these particles really are inside human bodies.
And Juliet, let's circle back to the questions that you were asking earlier, namely the most important one. Do we yet know with any certainty how much damage this is doing to our health?
No, I'm afraid we don't. Good news is that there is a lot of research ongoing to try to figure that out. So certainly here in Europe, the European Commission has invested millions of euros into research into microplastics and human health. And I know that other countries all over the world are following. So researchers like myself and Phoebe and others are looking at, so what happens once these plastic particles get into our lungs and get into our system? Can we study how they affect human cells in different laboratory situations? So moving away from the studies with animals into real human cellular models, looking at how these plastics are taken up, what shape and size is really important when it comes to uptake of the plastics, and then what are the biological effects involved once we look into these cellular experiments.
And a quick
Studies
follow-up
from
for
our
you,
own lab.
Juliet.
Sorry, go ahead.
Forgive me,
Yeah.
quick follow-up, but is it possible this isn't doing damage to us at all?
It's possible. It's possible that these plastic particles are rather inert. I personally think that from our initial biological studies that we've already seen changes in gene expression, and these in our cells, for example, in the placenta cells that we're testing in the lab, is already an indication that there are biological responses ongoing in the cell. Whether or not those responses will end up in a long-term adverse effect is too early to say. But the first initial evidence, we definitely can see a biological response, which you might consider to be considerable, to be comparable to another kind of small particle, like a soot particle from air pollution.
Rick.
I mean, I think I was going to go where Juliet just mentioned there. That so sure, some of the science around microplastics is recent, but here's two things we know about microplastics, and both of them are disturbing. The first is that the chemicals in plastic, we know a lot about them. We know that they have, in many cases, a carcinogenic effect. We know that they have a hormonally disruptive effect. When they get in our bodies, they mimic estrogen. And so that there's been umpteen studies over decades on the negative biological effects of the chemicals in plastic. The second thing we know that Juliet just mentioned, going right back to the Industrial Revolution, we know that bad things happen when humans breathe in small particles. Lots of studies on women during the Industrial Revolution working in big factories, breathing in fibers in the garment industry. We know what happens when miners breathe in coal particles. We know what happens when miners breathe in asbestos particles.
No good comes from any of this.
Bad things happen in terms of the inflammatory effect. So as Phoebe just mentioned, we now know that these particles are in, likely, the lungs of everybody on Earth. It is, I think, inconceivable that turns out to be good news.
Phoebe, can I get you on that as well? Is it possible that while this stuff gets inside us, it may not do any long-lasting damage to us?
I agree with what Juliet said. It's still, I mean, we're both scientists. It's still kind of early on. So I can say that, as Rick is indicating, there are plastic places that I don't want a plastic particle to be. So what those plastic are doing there, in that what the cellular interactions are, if that's leading to some of the negative toxicological effects, it looks like it likely is from a variety of different ways, both, as Juliet was indicating, through some DNA changes that we're seeing, as Rick is indicating, through some endocrine disruption. I think those are all really good places to start, as well as both the lung inflammation and just overall system inflammation. We know that when particles are places that they shouldn't be, as Rick is indicating, that they're doing things we don't want them to do. And now the question is, what are plastics doing when they're there, and what are the different types of plastics doing? Are those different outcomes?
And let me do a follow-up with you, Phoebe. You studied microplastics in pregnant rats. What did you find?
We did. We studied something even smaller called nanoplastic that we haven't touched on yet during this conversation. And that's a plastic that's about 1,000 times smaller than a microplastic. So this is definitely something that we can't see. Unlike a microplastic, it's barely within the visible range. And what we found when we put these nano-sized plastics into our pregnant rat model, we not only were able to find them in the placenta of the rat mothers, but we were also able to find them in the fetal tissues after a single exposure, and that was into the mother's lungs, and that was 24 hours after exposure. We started to look for them in those fetal tissues, and we ended up finding these plastic particles in the rat brain, liver, heart, kidney, lung, places we definitely don't want them to be.
Can you make, Juliet, any conclusions about what this might mean for pregnant women?
Oh, I'm afraid it's very early days for that, and I certainly don't want to alarm pregnant women at this time. What we are doing in our lab, in our studies, is we're doing large-scale epidemiological studies in which we're recruiting pregnant women in order to get samples from their placenta at delivery, and we'll be able to follow up the health of their kids. And only when we do those kinds of long-term studies will we be able to really be able to say with more certainty that there is indeed a health risk. In the meantime, that of course doesn't mean you can't reduce your plastic exposure as much as possible. And what's really important in all of the projects I'm involved in is that we have government policymakers on board who are thinking about how can we assess the risk of these microplastics. There's such a really complex mixture of contaminants. It's not just one type of dust particle. It's a really complex group of contaminants of many different kinds of plastics, many different kinds of shapes and sizes and colors, full of different kinds of chemicals. So really complex when it comes to the policies we need to make there. But I also would like to say it's really important that we have in some of our research, some of the plastic manufacturers on board who are looking for ways to produce better plastics, reduce the use of plastics, better understand how microplastics are formed from their products. And that's all really important work to think about solutions to this huge problem.
We certainly will come back to the issue of solutions and what we can do to change our behavior, change public policy. But before we get there, I want to talk to you, Rick, about the brain. Microplastics in the brain. What have you learned?
Well, I mean, Phoebe's actually done some of this groundbreaking research, and what she has found, and she should wade in here. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but as rat moms breathe in these particles, they then wind up in their fetuses, wind up in the brain compartment of those fetuses before the blood-brain barrier, in that critical moment of development that occurs in mammals, rats and people and others, where blood circulates in the body before that blood-brain barrier solidifies. And so these particles get locked into the brain. So in some of the, Phoebe, you should wade in here, but in some of our discussions, I mean, you've wondered about a link to Alzheimer's as
Phoebe,
one example.
You want to pick up on that, Phoebe?
Sure. There are some concerns. It's that the plastics are places that we didn't think we would find them because of those barriers. I didn't think that they would get past the placental barrier, and I certainly didn't think that we would find them in these tissues. Now, that's not to say that they're directly in competition or directly in some type of, next to a brain cell. They may still be in the vasculature of the brain. And these are some studies that we still have ongoing is exactly where they are, and therefore what they're coming in contact with, and therefore what kind of toxicology there may be. But I do know that we talk about dosage, and the dose of these particles and how many we're finding in the brain is very, very low in comparison to how many we originally put in. But I know they're in an area that we don't want to be finding them as well. So it really begets more what if studies and what we're going to be able to find from finding them there originally. But a lot more work is left to be done if they do have links to some of these neurological conditions that have increased in numbers as time has gone on.
Juliette, I want to quote a colleague of yours. You're going to help me with pronunciation on his last name, Dick Vetak. Is that how he says it?
Yep, very close. Vetak.
Okay, very good. Ecotoxicologist, part of the research team that discovered microplastics in the blood, and he asks the following questions. Where's it going in your body? Can it be eliminated, excreted, or is it retained in certain organs, accumulating, maybe, or is it even able to pass the blood-brain barrier? Okay, today we don't know the answers to these questions you tell us, but how long do you think we're going to have to wait before we will know with certainty how to answer these questions?
Well, not very long, I think. So, as I mentioned, a lot of research ongoing in Europe and around the world. In projects that I'm coordinating, we're looking at human blood-brain barrier models. We could be able to predict the uptake, but not only of one type of plastic particles, but of many different kinds of plastic particles. In addition, we're looking at uptake through the GI tract, through the placenta. So there's a lot of research ongoing. I think in the next 5 years, we are going to have a lot of answers to these really, really important questions.
In the meantime, Rick, the standard pushback against people who are making the argument that you are making, for example, is that, number one, we don't know with certainty today that this is doing any harm to people or their offspring. Number two, the burden of proof ought to be on you that it is, in fact, doing some damage. What's your response to that?
I mean, let's just reflect on the bonkers thing about this debate, which is that we're having a calm discussion here today about the fact that humans are suffused with tiny plastic particles that babies are being born pre-polluted. I mean, there was a study just in the last couple of weeks showing plastic particles in a human breast milk. I mean, it's inconceivable. And so the notion that the plastic industry advances, that none of us should be terribly concerned because there aren't any bodies in the streets that can be pinned on plastics pollution, is nonsensical. So for starters, 40% of all the plastics produced are for single-use items. Plastic straws, plastic cup lids, crummy plastic packaging on vegetables in the grocery store, stuff that could easily be eliminated. So rather than the onus being on consumers, being on governments to wait for the evidence to take any action, we need to reverse that. And we need to start asking, wait a minute. How do we start reducing the amount of plastic in the environment? How do we start reducing the amount of plastic in you and me and our kids? Okay, while we're also trying to pin down some of these scientific questions. But the lack of certainty is not an excuse for inaction. The lack of certainty should be a driver of concern and an immediate regulatory and corporate action.
Are you having these conversations with people in the plastics industry these days?
There's lots of conversations going on. Unfortunately, here in Canada, I mean, Juliette is in Europe, where European governments are moving much more aggressively than North American governments. Here in Canada, the federal government, to its credit, is trying to get rid of a few, like a half dozen disposable plastic items that can be easily replaced by other materials.
Well, straws are pretty much gone now, aren't they?
Getting there. But the plastics industry is actually taking the federal government to court. The government of Alberta is actually taking the federal government to court. And I have a very hard time believing that Canadians would find those reasonable actions. I mean, yeah.
Let me find out from Juliette. What's happening in Europe on this front, Juliette?
Well, in Europe at the moment, there's a regulation ongoing that should be passed soon to completely restrict the use of intentional microplastic use in cosmetic products. So at least the first step is being taken to reduce and restrict the use of these plastics that are used intentionally. And what also is going on is that chemical industry is involved in research, developing their own projects and working together with academic partners to work towards better replacements, better recycling, and looking at which plastics are really the worst when it comes to potential human health effects, and those are the ones to start with.
Phoebe, let me read this from Albert Rizzo, who's the American Lung Association's chief medical officer, who compared microplastics to the effort to convince governments that maybe they ought to cut down on, or try to convince people not to smoke. Same kind of campaign. And Albert Rizzo says, by the time we got enough evidence to lead to policy change, the cat was out of the bag. I can see plastics being the same thing. Will we find out in 40 years that microplastics in the lungs led to premature aging of the lung or to emphysema? We don't know that. In the meantime, can we make plastics safer? Okay, that's the question for you, Phoebe. Can they make plastics safer in the meantime?
I think it's exactly what Rick was identifying, that there's this back and forth of we haven't found something, so we're not understanding what it is we're making them safer for. And I think in the plastics industry, there's been a lot of cat and mouse. For example, there are many products that are now BPA free, and that's great. But the chemical companies have transitioned BPA to some other chemicals instead. Those same plastics, instead of BPA, might have a BPF or a BPS in them. So they're just changing the chemical construct of something that we knew was unsafe. And that's concerning because it is this cat and mouse game. So instead of that greater good understanding of is it something that we can transition, make some changes to, I think they would argue that they don't know what they're changing for or what they're changing against, because those toxicological studies aren't firm. As Rick said, there aren't bodies in the ground that can be directly related to plastics.
Well, okay, Rick, let me do this follow-up. Even at a certain point, the smoking industry understood that it was dealing with a harmful product.
Took a long time.
Took a long time. If you ask people in the oil and gas sector today, they will acknowledge that they're contributing to climate change. And, we can argue about how much time we've got to deal with that. Are there people in the plastics manufacturing business today that acknowledge this is happening and something needs doing?
Yeah. In my day job, I work at the Canadian Climate Institute, so I think a lot about the difference in the trajectory of these different pollution issues, right? And with climate change, yes, there's lots of challenges. Yes, there's lots of work to do, but the oil and gas industry is at the point, by and large, of buying into the concept of net zero. By 2050, we got to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions. There's broad consensus on that. We are nowhere near that point when it comes to this plastics debate. If the plastics industry gets its way, we're going to see a doubling of plastic production by 2040. And here's a crazy statistic. The acceleration of plastic production and use has been so rapid, even in the last 10 years, that half of all plastic made and consumed in human history has occurred in the last 15 years or so. And the plastics industry harbors the ambition of doubling that again over the next decade. So the first thing we need to do with this plastics question, if we want to get it out of our bodies, protect our kids, is start cutting back necessary use of plastic. There's lots of good uses of plastic, things that make our lives better. Probably half of the plastic produced goes into things that could easily be made out of other things.
In which case, is it ultimately up to consumers to lead a charge on this?
We're starting to see this already. I mean, there's a triangular relationship between consumer preference and consumer pressure, regulatory action by governments, and then the response of companies. And we're already seeing with chemicals, Phoebe mentioned BPA, phthalates, some of these other plasticizing chemicals. Young parents especially know to look for these when they shop. So we're starting to see manufacturers respond. And what we need to see is improved regulatory action quickly.
I'm going to ask our director for a 3-shot so I can say thank you to all 3 of my guests. There's Rick Smith on the left, President, Canadian Climate Institute. Phoebe Stapleton in the middle from Piscataway, New Jersey. She's professor at Rutgers University. And Juliet Legler, professor of toxicology at Utrecht University, who came to us from the Netherlands tonight. My thanks to all 3 of you for joining us here on TVO. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
There's no doubt that grades have gone up, and there's always going to be a concern about to what extent those grades reflect underlying skills and knowledge.
That's tomorrow on the agenda.